Thank you all for coming. If you're going to speak tonight, please come to this microphone because this one is out of commission for the evening. All right, we'll call to order the May 2nd, 2018 Select Board meeting. No changes to the agenda that I know of. Libby, announcements?
Thank you. This meeting is being video and audio recorded. We have our 2018 committee board and committee vacancies. They're all, if people are interested in applying, and we hope they are, for any of our boards, committees, or commissions, we have a lot of them. There are a number of vacancies. We have a couple of deadlines. The first is May 18th with a public hearing on May 23rd. The second is June 1st with a public hearing on June 6th. And then the board will be making committee appointments on June 27th. They're listed up here on the screen, and there is a lot of information on the town website. We have the first of two or more coastal resiliency workshops starting next Thursday, May 10th at 5 o'clock here in this room. And we have a pretty full agenda for that meeting. We've got a nice flyer that Florencia did for us. The next one is in July. We'll get a flyer out on that as well. But and we may be having additional workshops as time goes on, and we are also working on a survey. Our energy coordinator is here. She's going to give us some great news about a grant award for a solar project at the sewer treatment plant.
Yep. Good evening to the board. Lauren Sinatra, Energy Coordinator. Like Lydia mentioned, very good news. Last Thursday, we were alerted to the fact that the town of Nantucket will be receiving a $200,000 award from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection as part of the GAP 2 grant, which we applied for in November, which awarded funds for energy efficiency and renewable energy projects at wastewater or water drinking facilities. So that amount was the maximum grant award, and it will fund up to 90% of the cost for a town-owned 75 kilowatt solar photovoltaic project, which we estimate will save over $22,000 in electrical savings per year, or about 91,000 kilowatt hours. So I will be before you soon once we enter into the contract with the Mass DEP, and that will really pin down the scope of work and the project timeline. So great news.
That's great. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you so much, Lauren. That is a very significantly sized grant, and Lauren worked really hard on it, so thank you very much. I think that is it for announcements.
Okay, we're going to move over to public comment. Is there anybody here to talk about anything that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. There's none that I know of. Is there any issues with the payroll warrants or treasury warrants? If not, we'll consider those approved. Approval of pending contracts. Is there any questions or comments? Board?
No. A motion to approve?
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. That passes. We have a consent item, gift acceptance from National Resources Department. Is there a motion?
Motion to, second.
All those in favor? Aye. Moving on to citizen department requests. We have the Energy Office request for approval of comment letter to Federal Bureau of Energy Management in connection with the Vineyard Power offshore wind energy project. I believe Lauren's here to walk us through a little bit of that.
Yes. So the Federal Bureau of Ocean Energy Management has opened up a 30-day comment period for the public to provide comments regarding the Vineyard Wind project and their construction timeline and plan that they've laid out in consultation with our internal offshore wind evaluation committee and stakeholder input. It's my recommendation that we put forth this letter of some common sense recommendations to the Bureau. The feedback we've received is people generally support the project. They just ask that some of the visual impacts be mitigated. So to that end, we recommend in terms of nighttime lighting that they use what's called an aircraft detection light system. It's radar and motion detection based. It would reduce flashing nighttime lighting by 98%. So we think that would have the least nighttime visual impacts. To reduce daytime visual impacts, we simply recommend that Vineyard Wind relocate and reduce the number of wind turbines that are closest to Nantucket. and we outlined some ways that can be done. And the third recommendation is just for the Massachusetts Historical Commission to consult with local historical boards and stakeholders on their historic review of the project. So with that, any questions?
So when we had the visual out here a few weeks ago, it was pretty easy to see the turbines. And so what would the revision that you're requesting result in?
We also provided this revised map, if you can look behind you, and this is also included in our letter of comments we'll be submitting. We propose to relocate the first 13 turbines, which are located in the first 3 rows, to the rear of the plot. We also recommend that they prioritize the development towards the rear of the area so that it allows for technological advancements in wind turbine technology. So larger but less turbines can be placed in the area closest to Nantucket, because the feedback we received was concern over the number of turbines, not necessarily the size. The size is small, but the impact is larger the more there are. So those are the 2 recommendations we have.
Lauren, have you had any feedback from Vineyard Power as to how amenable they would be to some of those? Or if those, how possible some of those are?
We have not engaged them yet regarding these recommendations. These are our public comments to BOEM, and Vineyard Wind will receive these comments, and then we can have that discussion.
Matt, do you have any comments?
I just think they should be twice as close to the vineyard as they are to us. But it's Vineyard Wind. Let them. I'm fine.
As a move to the back of the...
I just
Okay.
scoot them right over next to the vineyard shore. I'm joking.
I
I'm
was...
with you.
Yeah,
All right, I just wanna make
thought you were
sure.
serious, so I was
Sarcasm
trying to
doesn't
figure it
always
out.
go over well here.
Any other comments from the board or from Lauren? Anything else? Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Motion
you.
passes. Thank you,
And we
Lauren.
will submit this to BOEM this week. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have the Finance Department request for approval of borrowing from State Revolving Fund for C Street Pump Station Project. Nantucket Harbor Shimo Plus Parcel Sewer Extension Project. Our Finance Director, Brian Turbot, is here.
Thank you. So this is on the screen behind you. You have the vote which we received from Bond Council. It's to authorize us to issue notes through the trust and then permanently borrow through the trust at a time acceptable to them for the C Street Pump Station Project, which we have received SRF funding for wastewater treatment facility that's going through an upgrade, which we had also received the SRF funding for, and then the Nantucket Harbor Shimo project we received the funding for as well. So this will allow us to issue temporary bans for us to get reimbursement for the SRF eligible pieces of that. And this is all timed to the repayment of the original bans that we had taken out in June to get those projects started last year. So I'm asking for a favorable motion to allow us to proceed with the issuance of the bans and bonds through the trust as we move forward with the rest of these projects.
Any questions, comments from the board? Jim?
And what are they selling? What are the interest rates on those now?
It'll be no more than 2%.
Okay.
Some of it will potentially qualify for 0 as we go through the process, but it'll be no more than 2% and it would be the cap.
So moved.
Second?
Yes.
So moved on May 2nd, 2018.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. On to Bartlett Tree Experts, request for waiver of town noise bylaw from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. from April 15th to September 15th, 2018 for multiple locations. Is there anybody here to speak on that today?
Jim Cook isn't here, but this is a request that you've received annually for the last few years and have voted for.
Have we received any complaints at all? Has town administration gotten any?
I would say one, maybe,
Okay.
but it was, I think, resolved. So
So I make a motion to approve the request for a waiver of the town noise bylaw.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. On to the town manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chair, the first item is a review of master planning for town parks. There is a sort of a background document in your packet here on the projection. And not to go through it in great detail, but basically at the 2018 annual town meeting, there was a reappropriation of $100,000 reappropriated from a playground replacement for the Tom Nevers Park to a master planning process for Tom Nevers Park. We also had an appropriation of $50,000 under DPW for master planning for municipal parks. And our recommendation to the board is that those amounts be combined into one RFP for master planning for parks, with obviously all parks, including Tom Nevers and Nobody Fields, would be included in the RFP. Our thinking is that doing separate RFPs is something of a waste of time and resources, and there's more sort of benefit to putting out one RFP, and it may end up being cost effective that way. So I don't know if there are any comments about that, and there may be, I don't know, people here who want to comment, but that's our recommendation, and we'd be putting an RFP together sometime within the next couple of months and get it out, and some kind of a group probably would be formed to internal with maybe a member or two of Park and Rec to help review the RFPs that come in, the responses, and we then select one and proceed to develop our master planning process.
What's the normal timeline on something like this? Not only dates, but if we did a full RFP for the 150, is it a year with work groups?
Well, it all depends on really what it is. The development of the RFP itself, just trying to fit it in with everything else and getting people together to review it and getting feedback and things like that, it's 6 to 8 weeks. And once the program gets started, I'm not going to be surprised if it's close to a year. It's going to involve a lot of public input. Maybe there's going to be a survey. Maybe there's going to be forums. We haven't really laid that out yet. That would be something we'd hopefully have our consultant that we end up hiring coordinate. But it could be a period of time, and then whatever plan comes out of it or projects that are identified would have to get worked into a capital improvement plan. So, I mean, it could take 12 months to longer to fully implement. Full implementation would be several years off, I would say.
Does the board have any questions or comments for Libby before I?
So will you talk a little bit about the Palm Beach Maritime Museum and members requesting that the agreement be executed with them?
Well, what I think seems to have happened there is last summer, fall, as you recall, some individuals came to the board and asked that some improvements be done to Tom Nevers Park, and they were, for the most part, well beyond the scope of our work program at the time. I think some items were accomplished, but the idea was to have really more of a master plan. But since we didn't have the funds at the time to secure any consulting services for that, it was put off to the annual town meeting so that we could get the funds reappropriated. In the meantime, though, I think there were groups that met with, I guess, members of the public and Park and Rec members and others, perhaps. I think a couple of selectmen may have been involved here and there. And what my suggestion was that the group start to seek public input and seek out stakeholders, camps and others, users of the property, neighbors, and start getting their input on that. And then perhaps there was some interest in the bunker. So the suggestion there was maybe find out if it's, how historically precious it is or is not, and what sort of uses might be there for it. If we were going to lease it out as seems to be proposed, then we're going to need to do an RFP for that. It may require a long-term lease at town meeting, and we just aren't equipped right now to deal with issuing an RFP for that. And our thought was that would be worked into the master planning process. It was more of a private effort, though, to reach out to the group.
The only question I have or concern is that the 100,000 initially was for, I think, replacing playground equipment. And now it's for the design, which would already be pushing that replacement off longer. But if we bundle them all together. I don't know, Jason, if you're there more often, if that playground equipment is going to last, what kind of condition Tom Nevers Park is in, and if it's prolonging it to a point where it's going to need to be replaced before this master plan is done. That would be my only concern.
I think you correct me if I'm wrong, Libby, but I think it was the entire area what kind of superseded just the playground, trying to figure out how to, from the erosion to it's falling, the whole thing's falling apart, not just the playground equipment. I haven't taken my little one there yet. She's not old enough, but I think it's going to be done soon, but it will be pushed back a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not great. There's some rust to it, and but it's still usable.
But it's manageable.
Yeah,
And it's sort of medium short term.
I think so.
Yeah. I'd say so.
Anybody from the public like to speak about the JFK bunker? Anything?
I just remember a different level of concern on the part of the people and Tom Nevers. So, in terms of the usability of that equipment, they talked about being dangerous for children, and I mean that's my that's my recollection. But if no one's here to speak to it, then
Nancy Wheatley. I'm at Six Rights Landing in Tom Nevers, and so this is of interest to me. I think we need to have. I think the first thing to do is to have a good plan as to what's going to happen out there, because I think there are a number of different factions that have different ideas, and the one that's important to my neighbors and I, for example, is we don't necessarily want to have concerts in that area, and that's been something that's been a big deal. It's a nice area. It can certainly be improved. But I think we'd like to. I think my neighbors and I would like to see it as a nice place to be, and to keep up with unfortunately the erosion, et cetera, that's going on there, and that's natural. We can't stop it, but we can certainly live with it.
And I know from some citizens who've already started some of these public outreach meetings, I think what I heard when I went, everybody was in the passive recreation side. No one was wanting to build amphitheaters and those type of things. So I've already felt that, and I think there'll be a lot more opportunity for public input in this process.
Okay, and are you all going to? Is someone from the town going to be putting together information as to when these things will happen?
Once there's some sort of a work group set up, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Wouldn't the work group be Park and Rec?
It may be Park and Rec, and it may be others
Okay.
with them.
So Park and Rec with some people along
Yeah,
board?
probably.
Okay.
Some at large, maybe.
Right.
Hi, Cheryl Emery, Park and Recreation Commission. I'm wondering in the master plan if we would consider having a Park and Recreation department. As it stands now, our Park and Recreation department is fragmented. We have DPW, we have visitor services, we have licensing, we have Park and Rec Commission, and we have community school. And so we kind of find that nobody really talks to each other, and it seems to be not cohesive. And I think if we had a Park and Recreation department, a park head, that would be help. Also want to mention that with the bunker, I know he was asking for a 5-year lease for the bunker. They have all the equipment, they have the money to completely renovate the bunker.
Cheryl, could you say who that was, just for
It's
for the
Anthony
public?
Miller from the Palm Beach Maritime Academy. I had reached out to him to see what they did with their bunker, and I found out they had closed it. Something to do with the Palm Beach, I guess something to do with their county took some property away from them to expand the port. So they need, it's been in storage, so they want to,
they need a bunker.
He had reached out to Nantucket before, but it was, I guess at that time, it was a gun club. down below there. So they have the Kennedy Foundation behind them. They have all the original artifacts that was in our bunker has gone there,
Oh,
along with their own artifacts from the JFK bunker. And they want to bring everything here, and they want to do educational tours. So that's, very low key. I know there's, with the new bike path, with the bunker, with the $100,000 being reappropriated, this could be, make this park a really nice, fantastic park.
And I think the bunker would be added into this. I think one of my questions was, if we do this master plan and it takes 6 months to 12 months to do this, feasibility study or get this consulting firm, will we lose the opportunity with this group down in Palm Beach?
Right, that's
Right.
another thing. I mean, I don't know. That's something that the town officials could reach out to see if they're willing to wait. I mean, the other thing I was wondering if there's going to be a commitment from the town for operational budget for park and recreation after we do this master plan. We've already done a master plan in the past for Tom Nevers, and it never got implemented, and it cost the taxpayers a lot of money. And so I'm thinking that, we do need that commitment for operations, for personnel, for maintenance, all the things it takes to run a park. So,
I may ask a question. Could you speak to that? You said there was a master plan developed for Tom Nevers. Could
yes,
you-
I think that was in 1995. I'm not really.
Okay.
Is that about right?
Okay.
Sure. I had one comment on the organizational stuff. We are doing, there's an RFP out for organizational study of all town departments, and that could be included in there, not so much this master plan for
Oh,
the
okay.
parks. So it'd be separate.
Separate. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just a couple of things. I think there were a number of items implemented from the 1995 master plan. And as far as the issue of reestablishing a park and rec department, I think it's not totally accurate to say that no one talks to each other right now. I agree it's not entirely cohesive, but there is certainly communication between the departments that handle parks. We had talked at one point about the possibility of expanding the community school to take over programming and the operation of parks, because they are already a set up organization for that, but that is beyond their scope as well. So we just need to be very cognizant that the master planning for the parks is not really so much of a staffing issue. And as you've said, the staffing study is something that could potentially look at that, as well as hopefully the open space and recreation plan that the Planning Commission is to be working on would incorporate something like that as well. But if it's a need, then we ought to fund it and be prepared to commit to it long term. Just let's keep in mind the big picture. There are a lot of needs that a lot of groups have, and they can't all be funded without funding resources.
I'll speak to that. My take on that is it was squeezed out. Just, historically, Park and Rec, it was more user-friendly. It did more things. And in the downturn, because of what we had agreed to in a lot of other areas, it was squeezed out. HDC was squeezed out. And we're still sort of feeling the effects of that. Some people say it's the most wonderful thing ever, but I don't feel that way. So, I do think we'd have to, we would have to reinstitute it. And if we reinstitute it, we'd have to make sure it worked within a budget and didn't just grow out of, control. So there's other things we have to do. You guys have heard me plenty of times, but.
Well, Park and Recs did have a staff, and now they don't.
Yeah, so that money went somewhere.
So
That
no, I
money
know,
didn't
but I
get- they
mean,
didn't get-
but it
we
was
didn't do an
exactly
underwrite.
right. It was as a result of the,
Yeah.
downturn, and those positions were eliminated, have not been put back.
Yeah, and we didn't underride. That money didn't go away. It went elsewhere, so
right.
it got squeezed out.
Yeah.
So that's,
Or there was no money because
less
it was
money.
an economic downturn. So there wasn't any money.
But it-
We had to,
But nothing was. It wasn't the money. The funds weren't reinstated as
right.
we grew and
no, but
had
the
more
budget,
money.
the budget still grew 2.5% a
Yeah,
year
right.
plus new growth. The new growth wasn't quite as much, but the budget still went up, even
Yeah.
in the downturn. And because we had agreed on other things that ate into that, we couldn't continue to fund certain things. So, it's a math equation.
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Jesse Dutra.
You can pull it up.
Okay. I think everyone can hear me anyways, right? Anyways, I just wanted to say that I'm thrilled that we are talking about this and that we've allocated some funds to get started on it. I think it's a much needed thing for the town. I mean, our community is one of the best communities in New England, and it deserves the best care for its parks and open space and enrichment. So I just am excited to see that this board is taking it and having discussion. And I feel like there's a lot of people in the community that feel that they could participate and help along the way. We have a lot of wealthy people out here that I'm sure would be willing to contribute as well. And so I just wanted to say thank you for bringing this up, and I hope that this is just just the tip of the iceberg in funds, and that we'll be able to be proud of our parks. And just another thing, I don't know if the board saw this, but there was a report that was done that was pretty extensive, done by some students at a certain college, I forget where. And one of the things was the New England communities in the funding for the parks. And Nantucket was by far on the lowest of those. And so I just wanted to mention that and say thank you, and hopefully we'll make some strides here.
Thank you, Jesse. I think you're referring to the WPI students study they did last year,
Yeah,
which is on the town website.
it's impressive.
Yep, I agree.
Just a quick question, Libby. Do these master plans, do they include maintenance programs, and then even estimates or costing? Do they help with that, or is it usually just the design itself?
The master plan that we're about to do, you mean?
The parks master plan.
I think that we'll have to work into our scope exactly what we want it to do. And if it, is something like we should be doing more at certain parks, then it may be that they'll put in some kind of initial cost along with future operating costs, but we'll have to obviously figure out about funding and prioritizing and things like that.
And Matt will remember when we've often talk about building new buildings and then not putting the money in for maintenance and support. I think I would very much like to see the scope of the RFP to include staffing for the master plan, and I'd go so far as to make a motion to include the staffing requirements for the implementation of the town parks master plan. I would make that motion.
Is there a second for discussion?
I'd second.
Is that a question? Does that help you, Libby, with direction for the scope?
Well, it's
Or-
something we'll certainly obviously put in the scope.
Okay, perfect. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against?
I'm in favor.
That passes. Aye.
Hi, Liza Otani. I have been working towards developing a multi-sports facility for the past few years, and we were presenting it to potentially be built on the Nobodier fields. The most recent presentation that we made to the land bank, they wanted some drawings, which we are now putting together, but there seems to be an unclear directive in terms of whether they're the ones that get to decide still, since they own the land, even though they lease it to the town, or given this new master plan, whether the whole idea needs to now be tabled until a master plan can be developed for that property, and whether the town will be making those decisions, or whether land bank is still in a first position to approve or not approve the construction. So it's our understanding that they had to kind of give the nod, and then it would be presented to the town as to whether or not this was something that would be embraced by the town. So just trying to understand the clarification given the new master plan.
Libby, any thoughts on that?
I think our thought was to include in the scope some kind of a review of the sports complex idea.
And that's land bank owned land, but they transferred the right to run programs on it.
I think the land that is mentioned is hasn't been developed yet. If I'm thinking of the right map.
Right, so there's a field that was approved to be constructed as another soccer field, which has not been developed. And that was one of the thoughts. Our sense was because the town probably wouldn't want to see a large structure, that you'd actually have to develop that as a soccer field and then build the building in probably one of the locations that's further tucked into the woods that's already constructed as a dirt field. But it's more the question of it, will these processes happen simultaneously, or does it now need to wait for an RFP for the full master plan?
I am not really sure how to answer that. We, in our office, we do not have the capacity to issue any kind of an RFP for the sports complex development of another field or anything like that. I've talked very briefly to the land bank about this, and I think they're very open to some discussion about it. But I think our thought was, in order to get at it, to put it into our overall master plan study, and maybe that is something that will come out of it. But there's still a whole process about, the funding and the planning and the procurement and the I don't even know what else.
Who maintains it the next 10 years?
Right.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we were looking at it as kind of a nonprofit, not private entity, but a nonprofit entity, not something that was going to fall under the town.
I don't want to double up on efforts here, and I think our hope was that this master planning process would encompass that.
That sounds like it should, yeah.
So that we don't have multiple processes going on that we can't manage.
Because otherwise, how will you be able to prioritize?
Right.
But I think if the land bank has the land and has control of the land, and it's in their charter to do sports, that if they, see fit to do that, they can do that outside of this process. If there's a group together and they've identified this is a need and they can do it, I wouldn't wait for for us to do something. I would continue working with. I would continue working with them to keep it going. It's a tough enough thing to do. I looked at this about 10 years ago. The one thing I sort of learned from talking to a bunch of people is you have to do it sort of efficiently and affordably. It has to almost be coin operated. You can't be building the Taj Mahal. If you have a field and a nice roof over it and people pay when they use it or do whatever, then you'll have something that'll be useful for a long time. If you overbuild it and try to make it this big fancy thing that may not be quite the demand you need. I think there's, hundreds of people who would play soccer 12 hours a day here, and into the evening, into the nighttime, in the middle of the winter if you let them. And I think the need is there.
Right. And that was what it was. It's really kind of an airplane hangar.
Yeah.
With some flat fields. Sorry. The design is mostly similar to an airplane hangar.
So this is outside the scope of the town.
Yeah.
This-
Well, if the land bank,
No, I understand, but
Yeah.
the town doesn't need to do anything, doesn't have to, but it's not going to cost us anything. And then it sounds like that's fine. I mean,
that's what I'm
otherwise,
saying.
but-
If they work out a deal with the land
Yeah,
bank,
that's
sort of like
fine.
the paddle tennis courts
Yeah.
are a great facility
Right.
that
but if it's,
enable
if
us to have.
it's going to, if it does require town funding, it's going to compete with other projects, then to me, it should be part of the master plan. But it sounds like it's independent and that seems fine.
Yeah, well, the Delta Fields was, that there was a lot of donated labor and a lot of fundraising to deal with that. We did that 25 years ago, because there was no place to play soccer. You get kicked off everywhere, so that's sort of between us and Little League. We built those fields, and that didn't cost the town a whole heck of a lot of money. So.
Hello, my name is Rich Brannigan. I am the director of the Nantucket Soccer Club, and we are the biggest youth sports organization on the island, playing on the park fields, flat park fields, that is. So I'm happy to see that there's a conversation going on about a master plan for the parks and recreation and the playing fields. I do think it's very important that if there's a master plan, that you include the actual users of the fields in the conversation or part of any work group as far as how the fields are being used or served or long-term planning is done. It's important to note that many of the fields that we play on now have been gifted to the town of Nantucket. Many of the land, the acreage, as Matt discussed, he was part of a project many years ago. And we do need to consider that the Nobadeer youth fields were also a significant gift to the town of Nantucket from the CPC. And all of that needs to be maintained and it needs to be serviced. And my major point that I'd like to get across tonight is that our parks, our playing fields are not being serviced properly, and they are becoming unsafe. Not just playgrounds, but playing fields as well. And I really need to see the town of Nantucket put resources behind the maintenance and the care of the playing fields. The turf field, the synthetic turf field for one, a great project. And as Matt said, it can be played on 365 days a year. But that too also needs care and maintenance. It should not be just a one and done. And if we don't plan for that in the master plan, that turf field will soon become unplayable and will soon become an eyesore and will soon become a cement and gravel playground, which won't work for anybody. So these are all things that I believe the select board and this work group really need to consider. And I hope that the users are part of the conversation. Thank you.
Makes sense.
Thank you, Richard. I think Jim's motion of making sure staffing is in the master plan and the scope will address that.
Yeah, I missed the beginning of the conversation. I'm sorry I came in when Mr. Dutroux was speaking. But the staffing is very important. And if we don't have the staffing to care for our current fields now,
Right.
we're talking about growing or expanding parks, we need to dedicate staffing
Right.
now.
We made a motion to add
Good.
that to the scope.
That's awesome.
Yep.
And I have a slight concern about losing flat playing fields to a large structure as well, because as Matt Fee knows, the land that the Delta fields are on is basically airport land, if I remember correctly. The airport commission could decide someday that they need that land for something of significant monetary value or a development that they need. So if we were to lose the Delta fields and there was a large multi-purpose indoor center at the Nobadeer youth fields, now we've lost significant flat playing fields for sports like soccer, lacrosse, baseball. It was at the Delta fields right now, Little League. So these are all considerations as we talk about these ideas.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. People think that the turf fields are easier to maintain. And if you don't take care of them, they have like half as much life. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but maybe they last 20 or 30 years, but they last like 10 years or 15 years if you don't take care of them. And it's things like you have to, they have a rake, you have to run through them, you got to lift everything up, you've got to add sand and add pebbles to them again. It really, you have to actually clean them. You've got to, you got to clean them with something. So there's a fair amount to it. It's not as simple as we just build these and we don't do anything. So.
Any other comments from public or members of the board? Okay. Thank you. Good.
All right, the next town manager item is review and schedule a fall 2018 special town meeting. So maybe to talk a bit about timing on that. There's some potential dates that I've put before you, October 22nd or October 29th, both Mondays. And if those are the dates or thereabouts, we will need to start reviewing potential warrant articles no later than July and preferably earlier than July, but start to kind of work on writing them in July, and then an adoption of a warrant mid-August. We'll need to schedule time for legal review before and after that, and FinCom public hearing, motions, planning board public hearings if there are zoning articles, and fitting in all the usual items, printing and mailing the warrant, and all of that sort of thing. There's some concern from the town clerk's office, as you all know, about the scheduling because there are other issues happening around this time in September, October, and November with a November election. My concern is that having the special town meeting after the November election, it starts to get very problematic with holidays, the budget, and the annual town meeting. And we're all going to be working on all that at the same time, and that is difficult. So I don't know if I have a specific recommendation on either one of those. The town clerk has most recently proposed Tuesday, October 8th. I believe that is the day after Columbus Day. And I think we find that days after a holiday can be difficult.
It's October 9th.
What did I say? Yeah.
8th.
I'm sorry.
That's the Monday.
Yep. So that would be the Tuesday. And
Yeah,
it
there's
just
always
gets-
last minute things.
Right.
And-
Right. It just gets kind of hard to manage and awkward. Anyway, so the 22nd and the 29th, I think are what I'm looking at. And I think you probably want to have a little bit of discussion about potential warrant articles. So today, if a couple of more ideas other than the two that are up there came up, including we don't know yet where the Airbnb tax legislation stands. There may or may not be something that we would want to act upon as a result of that. So that's kind of in a waiting pattern right now. The board had some prior discussion about potentially breaking out some of the Old South Road corridor projects that did not get approved at the most recent annual election. That maybe you want to break out a project or two there. That would subsequently entail a special election for what would likely be a debt exclusion. And I'll just quickly mention that.
So did you want us to make a decision on the date?
Yes, I didn't know if you wanted to discuss.
So
anything
as far as
else.
I'm concerned, either one's fine.
I'd make a motion for the 22nd.
Second.
Well, hang on, before we go there, is there any reason it has to be a Monday? Could we do it the 10th or the 11th? Which fits Catherine's calendar, and it isn't the day after a holiday
10th
We
or
don't
11th
have to
of,
do it. We don't have to do it on Monday.
of October.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a Monday.
No.
We could do it on a Wednesday.
That's true. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think the idea about a Monday is that it's the beginning of the week. It gets maybe it's traditional. I don't know. I could look at the 10th as a Wednesday.
Again, I mean, given the last minute, it may be better to have it other than a Monday.
Possibly. That's going to
Because-
mean moving things up a bit. So we're talking more beginning of August, end of July now for a warrant.
I understand. Yeah.
And just the week before, the week of the 15th, that one's what's sort of in between Catherine's and your suggestion.
I think there was some sort of issue with that week, and I don't.
So maybe you
know
need
what
to
it
come
is.
back with some more dates that might include a midweek.
I'm fine with the 22nd. And we're still in the discussion on the motion. We don't.
Yeah, I'm trying to work around Catherine's
Right.
concern about the primary and voting and state elections. I'm trying to work around both concerns.
I'm worried about doing it the week after, like sort of our last major holiday of the season.
The Columbus Day weekend. Yeah, or week.
I'd rather do it the 15th if that, but is there
I'm looking to
is
see
there a
if that's
religious
date.
holiday that week?
Thought there was an issue with the 15th.
I don't see any holidays. I don't have anything in my calendar.
So or
15th
October
or
15th to
17th.
November 16 doesn't work for her.
October, oh, okay.
Yeah, so, but we could go back, we could back from the 15th back into the Thursday or the,
Or the 10th, was 10th bad?
I wasn't really expecting this, so I'd have to
Okay.
really look back and see if there were any issues that week. I don't know that I have an answer right now on that.
Probably a Wednesday if we're going to do it midweek in case it were to go 2 nights for some crazy reason.
And it gives you the Monday,
So it doesn't go
Tuesday
into a weekend.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sounds like the Wednesday midweek sounds better than the Monday.
Might be good to
Tuesday.
change it up for once. Go to some other day besides Monday.
Well, we just did Tuesday. The annual.
So are you saying look midweek, maybe the,
Yep, I think so.
what is that?
Well, I'll withdraw my motion for the
Okay.
22nd. I'd be fine with the 10th.
So are we making a motion for,
I'll make a motion for the 10th,
I
and the
thought-
11th if need be.
second for discussion?
Libby, do you want to double check things?
Yeah.
and do
yeah,
this
I
next?
definitely need to double check
Yeah.
that.
Maybe we could wait.
So
That's okay.
Yeah, I'll wait.
Hold
So-
till next week.
Let's look into the 10th.
Yeah, let's look into the 10th.
And 10th or the 15th, or the 10th or the
17th.
Okay.
All right. Now, what do we want on the warrant?
I didn't know that.
Well, we need to have something to do with retail marijuana. And we need to, which was, I was going to mention under comments, but and I know we have our forums coming up, our listening forums, but we really need to be spending some time at this meeting talking about this stuff. I don't have a, so I don't know if we need to have Katie, is it Katie come back? Have her come back. It's for me, it's helpful to have her here. Last time I heard about this, perhaps home delivery that, raised some concerns. I don't know if we're at a point where we're ready to have someone draft an article. I don't think so. I think we have some conversations we need as a board.
Yeah, in the public forums as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, we so Libby and I and Florencia met with Chamber and ACFM today with the idea of having them run one of the listening sessions. We would also do ours, but also they would have it in a different setting, not in here. Not everybody wants to come here in a microphone in this kind of setting. And we had some good ideas of them having some kind of, whether it's a chamber awareness series, and the first one would be marijuana, and they would promote it and not pretty much, before one way or the other. So I thought that was good conversation that we had today.
and I was happy to see we got some feedback from at least one of the boards that we invited to comment. The school board's going to be taking up this issue, and I'm looking forward to hearing their comments. But at some point, we have to start drafting. Maybe, I don't know if we can, if it's too early to pick a date, but I think whenever we can schedule something on the agenda, seems like given our agenda, we've got time to do that kind of thing. So,
Rita?
I wouldn't feel comfortable drafting anything until we've had at least one of our public forums. So if we
I'm
know
not
those
suggesting
dates,
that,
And I think Don made a great point at the last meeting about any opportunity we have for anonymous feedback. So even in a Chamber of Commerce event, if there's somewhere where people can just write a note, because I think a lot of people still aren't comfortable, completely comfortable, giving their opinion publicly.
Right.
Just a little update on the public outreach and public gathering of public information on this. We've had some internal talk, and I've talked with the chair a bit about this. So as you all know, we emailed the school committee, the Board of Health, ASAP, the hospital, and the Behavioral Health Task Force to see if they've taken any positions on retail marijuana sales, and we're in the process of hearing back from them and seeing if maybe they want to come to a meeting, board meeting sometime soon, and talk about it. We talked with the chamber today about the chamber itself doing the forum, as the chair mentioned, and we've also talked about a town-sponsored forum that we maybe would have in a non-town building, possibly the Athenaeum if it were available, where we would try to give information to people about what it is that the board would be considering to put on a special town meeting. So in other words, what are the things that municipalities can implement and vote on? And then really try to get input. The chamber stepped forward and offered to help with this so that we could sort of take the town a little bit out of it. Maybe we heard, I think, from the prior forum that people might feel more comfortable expressing their opinions in a different way or a different venue, I guess.
Environment, yeah.
But yeah. So we're trying to follow up on the getting of the public input.
But does it, according to this, so are we saying, again, that maybe have to be backed up if we do an earlier, but where it says review of potential warrant articles would need to occur in July. So by sometime early in July, we would have to have made those kinds of decisions.
Correct.
So that's May, June.
Right.
We're in May. I'm just,
Yeah.
as time gets away from
I know
us.
where
and-
we are.
I think we could have both public forums, listening sessions, one in May, one in June, make a decision in late June, early July.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out the best timing, what best time of day, what day of the week to get the most participation.
Just leave time for us to talk about it and, have a couple meetings to digest it and really think about it, at least from my perspective.
Makes sense.
I want to make sure that we know what the potential costs of the town might be with this. We, when I look at the studies, there are costs here. There's, extra police, there's extra firemen, there's more time in hospitals and things that you don't really think about. And those could end up potentially being sort of an unfunded mandate. The state and the corporations make money, and we have to, sort of figure out how to pay for it. So I just want to make sure that we've had, some input onto what potentially those might be. I just think it's part of the equation. It's not the only thing, I think.
I think our department heads, given their, have peers that have implemented these things and phone calls from one police chief to the next to say, I think would be great.
The chief has provided me with some information from Colorado, was it? About that sort of thing, but I don't think, unless I'm mistaken, I haven't asked staff to start to try to figure out what those costs are. I think that's going to be challenging.
I think that's important to try to at least get a handle on, though, because if we have public hearings and we can't say, then if we're going to just do it based on public how people feel about marijuana, then that's not really is that a basis for a decision? We all have our own feelings about it, but is that, so I just think that we should look at it a little bit. I think I shared a study that they did for all of Connecticut that outlined some of these. So maybe that could be, I could dig that up and forward that along so that, so the staff has a way to look and see if that applies to them, or just as a framework to think about it.
I think it should be pretty easy to say, here's, XYZ town in Colorado had 20 officers before this was implemented and 20 afterwards, or some other number. So that's a factual search.
I think that's probably in the information that the chief has.
Okay.
But it's, it's not a 10-page document. It's hundreds of pages.
Oh.
So it's about the third of the size of one of our weekly packets.
Yeah.
No problem. No, I look at some of the Aspen stuff, and I think it was this year, their amount of liquor store sales is about equal to the amount of pot sales. They've just gotten to the point where they're equal. So it's pretty interesting. That's not liquor in the hotels or the bars or anything, but just straight in the things.
And what's do you know their ratio of liquor stores to pot stores?
There's less pot stores. I don't know exact numbers, but there's less. And I read some of those. I'll talk about it in selectmen's comment too
Yeah.
about some of the things they're dealing
Yeah.
with, but from other issues. But it's kind of interesting to look. I always look at Aspen because it's somewhere that's like, I was there a bit in my youth, and it's somewhere that's about 25 years ahead of us. So the problems that we see, they have like 15, 20, 25 years before us. So it's kind of a bellwether in a way for where we're heading, I think. So,
I thought it was, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I thought it was interesting. The last couple of people that I've asked about what they thought about zoning, regulating marijuana, two of them, one has been sober for a year, the other I know smokes, but both of them made the comment that they felt there needed to be more opportunities on Nantucket for people to do things that don't involve smoking or drinking. And I think that that's something, particularly with conversations about sports complex and even how we're looking at cars and traffic and rotaries, but also promoting pedestrian friendly, not to lose sight of, any opportunity that we have to promote other activities as well. So just thought that was interesting.
Good point. Especially in the wintertime.
And summer.
Any other thoughts from the board on what they'd like to see on the warrant?
Well, we did also briefly talk today about potentially funding for a feasibility study for an elder and community center. That maybe it would be better to do that in the fall.
So at your meeting.
Would that be in place of doing anything at the Island Home, or how is that? Would that be in place of doing something for the Island Home, or is that?
No.
Okay. Yeah, maybe just talk a little bit about it. I'm not familiar with that idea.
More. Well, we're going to be talking about it next week in
okay.
regard to the Saltmarsh Center
Okay.
and
Okay.
the future
Okay.
of that facility.
And CEA is coming in next week to review the elder services study assessment that they did last fall and into the winter. And I think they have a number of outcomes from it that, depending on how the board sees things, we may be working into a budget at some point.
So
There's been a
So
lot
how-
of people asking about the idea of a community center that would wrap in an elder center. And I just think maybe it's time to do a feasibility study.
How are we going to tackle the issue of the Old South Road infrastructure improvements? Are we going to, is that a joint conversation with planning, or how is this board going to engage in that?
We could ask planning to come to your meeting next week and have.
I'm just
discussion
I'm
about it. Yeah, no, I think it's
asking. I mean,
I
I'm
think
just
it's a
trying
good
to,
idea.
because I don't have a good answer. I'm so disappointed that project did not get approved, but from everyone I talked to, I shouldn't have been surprised. So it's more than just let's just take this project and divide it up into some larger number. It's I don't know what it's prioritizing. It's getting feedback from the community or input, and made more. I think a lot at town meeting people said, "Well, what's this going to look like?" And we didn't have the visuals to show people, and that's what people like to see. So, again, a lot of work to be done.
I think that's a really good point. I'd be happy to ask planning if
Okay.
they can come in next week and be coming with maybe some kind of a recommendation or prioritization type of thing.
So that's okay. I mean,
yeah, I think that makes sense. I've had conversations and looked at it, and I think Milestone Rotary to Amelia Drive or something like that would be appropriate. Take out all the Milestone. So the two rotaries up to Amelia, something like that could be kind of segmented.
I think Mike Burns definitely has some thoughts on it.
Yeah.
we talked for most of NPDC has been discussing that entire project. One of the things that needs to be answered is, are we just moving cars more quickly and they're going to back up elsewhere? That wasn't in the scope of the study that was done for this corridor. This corridor, the study was how is it going to impact Old South Road and Milestone? There wasn't any look at how is it going to impact Five Corners or Washington Street or anywhere else. And so some of the people who have talked to me have said, why are we spending $15 million to move cars quicker so they can just back up at another intersection. So I think if we are going to try to move this forward in the fall, that would be something that should be answered. And it wouldn't be that difficult. There's guys that do this and have warned us, but if we're adding 350, 500 cars a year, there's going to be impacts. And, we can't, I kind of look at it slightly. I look at it and say, we can't build ourselves out of our traffic problem. We can't add cars and think our traffic problem is going to improve. We need to put our emphasis on the alternatives. So, I think that's a slightly, and I still think, I still supported doing that project because I think it made walking safer and biking safer, so I was in favor of it for that reason. And it was a connection for some of those alternatives. But I think we still have to go a step further if we want to get the support of the community on it.
So I was surprised when I learned the other week that there are 700 rental cars that come on this island every year that aren't here now. I assume. I mean, I'm just making. So that's a bunch of we heard that from Tom.
No, not that come on island, that are available to rent on island.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
I mean, there's right now. That's like say there are very few on the road, and in August there are 700 on the road. So I'm exaggerating, but it's directionally correct, and that's a big number. So.
And I think they're capped, and the number hasn't changed, but the usage has changed.
Right. Yeah.
So they're available.
Yeah.
They're on the road every single day.
Right. I know, but that's just. I mean, if you think about it,
it's additional. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a thought about next week's meeting. If they are available, maybe we invite some of the other groups that we wrote to about the marijuana issue to come in,
Okay.
just to get going
The
on it.
planning board won't talk about it until our next meeting, which is Roberto in a few weeks.
The Board of Health.
The Board of Health. What did I say? Yeah.
Planning board.
Planning. Okay. Yeah. 17th. Okay.
So maybe the following.
Okay, so we could do the following week on them. I can ask the other groups if they'd be ready to come in, just to,
Another thought on possible warrant article. Be too early to consider funding sustainability office. I know that we talked about that. I'm not sure if that got pushed back, but
The feasibility study for it.
No, to fund the office.
well, we had set some dates
Yeah.
for actually having someone as a sustainability
Right.
officer.
Officer. Yeah.
Yeah. And
So I think right, and I think someone on this board was pushing for it, and then we realized that it was probably a little aggressive.
Yeah.
So I backed down.
Oh.
So,
Okay.
and I think
so
we were talking July
okay,
because we're in the middle of a budget year. So
right.
yeah.
And we haven't finished the goals yet, the strategic plan yet. So I know we want to move on that, but that is also going to require some detailed staff review of how to set it up, where it's going to be located, where the funding is going to come from, what the funding would be, are there grants? There's a
Job
lot.
descriptions, all that.
Yeah.
So that's more annual time. It's too
I
early.
think so. Yeah.
That's good. I mean, yeah. So no, it's good.
And I think we should try to be careful about how much we put on to the fall town meeting. I mean, we're being forced into this. In an
Right.
ideal world, we wouldn't be having this.
Right.
We're being forced into this by
Oh, that's true.
other options. I think we should try to keep it,
That's a good point. yeah.
focused on that. So.
I was debating whether or not to mention another possible article, although maybe this is an annual item. There is some fairly new wastewater legislation that allows towns to implement up to 3% surcharge on tax bills, very similar to the Community Preservation Act that's dedicated to wastewater projects. The town of Sandwich has been looking into it, and they haven't adopted it yet, but our town council is their town council, so we talked about it a bit. And it may require some public outreach and some projections. I've talked briefly to the FinCom chair about it, and it's certainly something worth pursuing.
Are there matching funds like there were with community preservation?
No, I don't think there are. So it's
So
just,
it's an added fee
yeah.
to the taxpayers. To
yes.
the rate. So I'm thinking that's an annual town meeting conversation.
Yeah.
Not a
Yeah,
special.
you're right.
Yeah, if it was like CPC and there was matching funds to be had,
Yeah,
that's an
and we
easy
wanted to get in
that's
on
an
it.
easy sales pitch because you're saying, hey, you're getting we're getting $1 for $1 on this. let's get ahead of it and do it, which was the pitch when we did the CPC. But
Something
So
like that,
maybe to
Libby.
Matt's point, maybe we don't need to spend a lot of time coming up with things.
Yeah.
So
keep it simple.
Agreed.
So what do we have? Possibly Old South Road. We'll talk to planning, transportation planner, and get a suggestion from them.
and marijuana.
Marijuana, senior center feasibility,
Yeah.
possibly, or maybe annual.
I think
Or if I can't wait,
I'd like to see
if I
that
can't
sooner.
wait to, if we have the criteria that this is something that can't wait till town meeting, I think, I think we should be circumspect about it.
Okay, and then something for Harbor Place. That's kind of our. We have 3-ish. Okay. Anything else? Any other comments? All right, moving on to selectmen's reports, comments. Anybody have any meetings this week, last week? Comments? Jim?
Just at the Board of Health, town meeting approved another $2 million, I believe, to support the loan program for people with septic issues. And we talked about, we've seen an increase in the utilization of those funds for a pretty significant replacement of landscaping. So with this we weren't able to put any collars or controls around it. That was the terms of the current funding. But we're going to be beginning to develop guidelines at our next couple of meetings. So when we're ready we have about $200,000 left, I think, in the original amount. And that could be gone just in a handful of projects. So we're going to develop guidelines in terms of the caps, perhaps, on the utilization of those funds for something like discretionaries like landscaping.
I've got a comment. As I was reading marijuana articles from Aspen, I came across, they undertook a 2-year moratorium of building in their downtown core. I sent everyone a link to that here. Yeah, and it was pretty, and like I said, it's good to look at them because they're 20 years ahead of us. And the issue they were having, they made some zoning changes and they increased height. This was in like 2000 or so, under the guise of this is going to give us more affordable housing. What the developers did is they just bought that out. So they didn't have to, they could buy the housing elsewhere. And what was happening is these 45, 50-foot buildings were happening in their core that were high-end penthouses, basically. And so it had sort of the first zoning change had an opposite effect of what they thought. Their rules were such that if you didn't have any parking already, you're allowed to just scrape the building away and build a new 5-story building, which was happening. And they were losing what they call local serving mom and pop shops. They were losing, sort of ski shops and used clothing and stuff like that were all being wiped out. And the condos that were going in place, the people that were buying them and living there for a week or two a year, et cetera, with the views of the mountain, they didn't want that stuff underneath them. So even if the developer put it in place, they would rent it and leave it empty. They'd rent the down floor and leave downstairs and leave it empty. They had a bunch of weird things going on. So they had to revamp their zoning code to try to address a lot of this. So they took a break for 2 years, and they've came back out with different zoning. They did a formula zoning. They charged $38,000 to waive a parking space. They require 65% of the employees of a new building have to be housed. They, either there or somewhere else. So they really, it's interesting for us to be thinking, I think, to be thinking ahead of what do we need to do to be ahead of these issues and not be sort of surprised by them. They're on the way. How do we ensure that we sort of keep our place nicer now? So anyway, I thought I know moratorium, and I'm not suggesting we do a moratorium downtown or anything like that, but I am saying that this place, things that we can learn from other places that are high end, that are under similar pressures that we are, that are seasonal places. And it's kind of interesting to spend a little time and look at some of their issues.
I thought there were a few things that were similar to some things that we do have, but there were some things that we could learn.
Yeah,
that
very
we did
different. They do
too.
floor area ratios, which, we haven't really tackled. And they look at it slightly differently. And they're way ahead on their housing. I mean, they have thousands of units, and it's still not enough. They're still under pressure. So.
Jim?
This is really just a comment and maybe an observation, but it's related to the Sconset Bluff Preservation Funds application before this board. I just want, I guess this is more of a statement. This, for me personally, this is one of the most complex issues that I've faced as a member of the board. And it's something I spend all the time I can learning about it. And every time I learn something more, it raises some other questions. But I just want everybody, because I'm concerned that the rhetoric out there, at least as evidenced by some of the correspondence, questioning, working in good faith and those kinds of things. That really concerns me, and I hope we can kind of minimize that. But I just want everybody to know that this board is spending an inordinate amount of time learning about this, both in our sessions here and an open session and the executive session. I thought the session we had a few weeks ago where people came and had an opportunity to speak, I learned a lot from that, and maybe we can do more of those. But I just want the folks in TV land to know that this is a complex issue, and me personally, and I know all the board members are spending a lot of time trying to come up with the right decision. Thanks.
I know this is your report, not mine, but I just wanted to mention that another item on your meeting next week is a review of the 2017 water quality testing results. Just FYI.
Yeah, we're definitely not kicking the can down the road. Jim, I would agree. It's the majority of my time on this subject matter. I had a couple quick things. A fun thing today, I took a tour of the C Street pump station with Mr. Gray. And I took a tour back in November, and when it was under construction. It still is. And I would encourage all the board members to take 10, 15 minutes and walk through with David or someone from his staff. It's kind of fascinating of where things were, what they've thought through. It's pretty, I would encourage you to do that. I learned a lot. I tried to put some everything I was trying to remember everything you were telling me, David. I tried to put it on Facebook for kind of public outreach purposes. With the picture of me with the orange hat, not looking great, but and then
Hazmat orange.
what's that?
Hazard orange.
Yes, yeah, it felt good to have a hat on. And I've already forgotten my second thing. So, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.